All right, everybody. I will give you a little bit of an update on what happened with the battery today. So, yeah, I had it charging since about 9 a.m. and then at about 3 o'clock I came down and it's sitting at 3.8 volts, so that 13.8 volts. So that means the battery is full. If I unplug it, of course, it's going to go down to whatever it needs to be. It's still getting 2.7 amps out of the battery. So it's still plugged into the, after the solar, it's still plugged into the solar. So yeah, this took about 6 hours to recharge. And I was getting about 2 amps on average. It's kind of a rainy, cloudy day, so a lot of cloud cover. And of course the cloud cover reduces the amperage quite a lot. So figuring that out, I probably in 6 hours a 2 amp hour average. I'm estimating this was about 18 amp hours that I had to add back into the battery. So 18 amp hours was lost during the 36 hours that I had a little fridge plugged in. That means that that little fridge is actually consuming about half an amp hour every hour. So with this battery, if we're at 50 amp hour at depth of discharge of 50%, that would mean that this battery system is going to last me for about 100 plus hours of standby. So meaning if we don't have any sunshine, we're going to be able to keep our fridge going for 4 days, right? Over 4 days. And even if there's minimal sunshine, this panel, when it was overcast, it was still doing 0.7 amp, right? Even with an overcast situation, 0.7 amp, which is, something. It's not great, but it's something. And 0.7 amp, let's say we got 10 hours of 0.7 amp, I can still put 7 amp hours on top of it. Which means I can put about 14 hours worth of capacity for that fridge back easily within even an overcast day, right? And I'm super stoked about this. So I did a calculation in the comments of the description of the previous video where I showed you this stuff, and I came to about $400 for this whole setup, right? Excluding the solar power controller, this came with the panels. So you'll get this with any $100-something panel. My panel is foldable and it is a little bit more expensive. I went for the foldable one because of the capacity in the car. And when you go camping with 2 kids, there's never enough room in the car. So I just went for the most compact solar solution that I could find that had, sort of a decent price. Then I calculated that the battery was $304 on sale. The box was $35. That's $340. And then miscellaneous stuff like these plugs. The 2 plugs were like $10, and that's 10. And then the cables and the shrink wrap and all of the other stuff that I bought, and of course these cables and connectors and all of this, I have a bunch of those still left. That cost me about $60 total. So that brings me to $400. The Jackery 240 that I bought and returned was $369. So I'm sort of $30 over budget on that. I just wanted to build this at the same cost as the Jackery. I didn't calculate the cable costs, right? I didn't think that I'd be spending $60 on cabling and all the other stuff. Well, the other 30 on cabling. That's where the $30 mishap happens, because I included the box, I included the toolbox, I included the battery in the price, I included these guys, and I said, well, yeah, this is going to be cheaper than the little lithium thing. Now, There's one thing about this. If I was just going for something very mobile, then I would keep the Jackery 240. It is a much lighter product. It also has an inverter on it, which this guy doesn't, right? I only have the 12 volt and the USB sockets. However, I do have an inverter in the car. It's like a 160 watt inverter that's good for running my laptop and stuff like that. So I'm not really worried about not having an inverter. I just plug it into the 12 volt and it gives me 120 volt out of this thing. So that is not a problem at all. What the thing is missing is light. It's not lightweight, right? This thing weighs a ton. This is super heavy. This battery itself, I think, is something like 60 pounds. The volume of capacity. So let's say 50 amp hour versus the 13 amp hour of usable capacity for a Jackery 240. I'm getting 4 times the capacity, the usable capacity, and the Jackery is about this big, right? About this big, sort of. So this battery is less than 2 Jackeries. If I calculate this whole box, a Jackery is about this big, and then another one, and then another half of one. So I'm about 2.5 times the volume of the Jackery. And now we're talking about the Jackery 240, which is the smallest one, the 16 amp one, right? If I went for the 500 watt hour one or the 1000 watt hour one, those are bigger again. And of course, they're much more expensive. The 500 watt hour one is about, I think it's about, yeah, I mean, it's way more expensive. Doubles the price, like 700 plus bucks. And then the biggest one is like $1,100-$1,200 Canadian. Whereas this, I built this basically for the price of the small Jackery. And of course, the controller is nicely tucked away. I'm going to put the other controller here. I'm going to replace it with a multi-point power tracking controller so that, you know, the controller is much more efficient. This is something that's a nice hobby project. And I designed this as a hobby project. I didn't want to spend a ton of money. Now, I could have gone for lithium batteries. If I would have gone for lithium batteries, I would have gone for the lithium polymer, the Li-Fe Po4, right? The lithium polymer batteries. You get probably a 100 amp hour battery in a format that's about this big, so half this size. You get it for approximately $800, something like that. That's where they start. And at that price point, that's a really good price point. And you get 80% depth of discharge out of the box. This one will do 50% depth of discharge. So you're actually getting 52.5 amp hours. Whereas a 100 amp hour lithium polymer battery will give you 80 amp hours. So that's 60% more capacity out of the box. I can take this down to 80%, right? I can take this down to 80%. If it was an emergency, 80% would mean 80 amp hours. So that would give me 160 hours for the fridge. So that would give me, like, you know, a week basically. A week of that fridge. Now, you will damage the battery a bit, right? That 80% depth of discharge will damage a battery, and it will lose the number of cycles for charge. These batteries are rated at about 800 cycles when you go to 50% depth of discharge, and then you're rated at about half that, about 500 when you go to 80% depth of discharge. Right, you're still basically getting the same capacity out of the battery, right? You're still getting the same amount of capacity over its lifetime. That's the point of batteries. You don't, if you go deeper, if that's the point of these lead acid batteries. If you go deeper in depth of discharge, you'll just have less cycles, right? Each cycle delivers a certain amount of amp hours. So 80 times 500 or 80 amp hours times 500 charges, you know, it's, sorry, let me calculate again. 50 amp hours times 800 charges, or 800 charges times 50 amp hours. 50 amp hour times 800 charges, or 880 amps times 500 charges. At the end of the day, you get the same amount of amps out of this battery, right? Whereas with lithium ion, you get, you know, much better capacity with 80% depth of discharge. Yeah, where was I? Yeah, so this is a setup. Now, in a future project that I might do, I have some ideas. I'm sort of kind of getting into this solar thing, and potentially looking at running the whole house off of solar. I was thinking of building an awning made of solar panels. So instead of, you know, having a roof, you just put solar panels on the awning for our deck, which is facing south, which would probably, just for the awning itself, if I do the minimum size, I get about 12 panels. If I do a maximum size, I would probably be able to fit about 20 panels. The idea here is I would put 300 watt panels, and I would put 12 panels, so that will give me like 3.6 kilowatts of capacity. I could feed my house with about 6 kilowatts of capacity. So the rest I would need to make room for about 20 panels, so I get 6 kilowatts of capacity, and then we basically can go off grid with our house. We either do net metering or we get off grid. If we get off grid, I don't think I'll go with the AGM battery. AGM batteries have a lifespan of about 6 to 7 years, whereas lithium ion batteries or lithium polymer batteries, they have a, you know, as long as you keep them at the depth of discharge of 80%, they will have like 20 years plus lifespan. So if I did it for my house, then I would go and invest in lithium batteries. I would actually go for maybe a 48 volt system. A 48 volt system would be the most efficient because you don't need that large amount of cabling. Or the other option that I'm looking at is actually doing it with micro inverters, where each solar panel has its own inverter and actually feeds AC power into the system, and then get an AC battery like a Tesla Powerwall, which is an AC fed battery, which takes AC in and then gives you AC out, right? And that would be a good option too, because what I would want to do is then take grade B panels. So there's 3 grades of solar panels. Grade A, which is like, you know, the warranty one, you know, the most expensive one. Then it's grade B, which has cosmetic mistakes or even cracked solar panel components, right? So the cells can be cracked in there. As long as they still have contact, they can work. Even if it's cracked, it can work for 10, 20 years, no problem. The idea about B grade panels is they come without warranty, and some of them will die. Like you'll have, you know, 10% that will die over their lifetime. But if you have multiple strings of panels and one dies, you know, then you're losing your whole output. Whereas if you have microinverters and you're feeding AC, if you lose a panel, you just lose that panel's capacity. You lose 300 watts. That could be more complicated. I'm researching that still. Could be more complicated to put in, but it's actually a good idea. You can save about 40% by going on grade B versus grade A. They still have the same power rating. They don't come with warranty, so you know, anything going wrong, you just buy a new panel and you put it in yourself. But if you are building it yourself, and if you're going to be storing this power into your sort of own battery, maybe a battery sitting in the basement, maybe an electric car, not feeding it back into the grid so that you can survive this kind of failure, then grade B is the way to go. Yeah, it's all about a cost calculation. So yeah, this is something that I'm thinking about. So yeah, definitely comment and let me know what you think about solar. Let me know what you think about my energy storage solution that I've got here. I'm gonna tie into cloud computing and solar soon. I have something coming up like that. Oh, there we go. We're charging again. So Must be flow charging a little bit now, just to keep the battery topped up, which is really good, which means we're running great here. That's really, really good. I'm super happy with this setup. Anyway, as I said, yeah, let me know if you're interested in seeing more content like this. It's not a cloud computing sort of thing, but if you're into technology, you're probably also into solar, probably not necessarily. It's one of my things that I like to do, like tinker with these kinds of things. And yeah, consider subscribing. That will help me grow this content. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. Bye.